All good. Yeah, yeah, good, good. Yeah, just slow and steady growth with that drawing, which is good fun, just taking our time, but all going in the right direction. And we got a Florida camp. We're flying out on Sunday, so that'll be pretty sick. We did that last year. Um, which I think it's like 25 degrees, and that's all I need to know. When you're the coach, you don't care
Oh,
about wind as well. Like all you care about is it being warm. Wind doesn't affect you, right? Like
yeah, this is the time of the year to do it for sure.
yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Just hopefully nobody dies and everybody's somewhat happy. That's the main objective
That's,
of training camps.
yeah, that's then it was a good camp, wasn't it? Yeah, no one died.
Yeah. Yeah, but Alan's coming out and then Taylor, one of our other guys, is coming down. So we maybe have too many coaches. We've got like 13 of us. Oh no, sorry, not 13 coaches. Four,
I was
three
going to say that is
coaches.
too many.
Yeah, 13 coaches and four rowers. Can you imagine? Fucking hell. No, the other way around. But have you been on a podcast like someone else's before?
No, no, no,
Oh, are you
no.
nervous?
Not really, based on how much talking I've done. A few of the early episodes we did when we had no guests between me and Pete. Pete's done a bit more of sort of like interviewee style on me, and
Okay, yeah.
I think we did an episode where we each answered a few of our quick fire round questions and stuff. So, um, no, I'm happy enough. I think that's one of the great things about doing the podcast is it's made me feel a lot more just
Yes.
comfortable what I did and what I achieved. And it's made me feel like I might not have achieved what a lot of other people achieved, but I still get treated by them as on the same level. And ultimately, it's not about like what you did while you were there. It's just that you were there, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I can relate to that. Yeah, and I do. I listen back to the podcast as well, and just in terms of like other forms of development, I think it's a really interesting way to learn about communication where it's just I guess there's not really like a natural kind of communication style. So I'm always trying to think about how can I ask questions better and not just be like, have you ever seen the fucking show Hot Wings or First We Feast Hot
Yeah,
Wings? I
yeah, yeah,
hate that show. That guy, he just goes like this. Like the guy, he'll ask, so this is a question, and then the guy will go like, oh yeah, blah 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 blah, blah, like really interesting answer, and he'll be like, huh, next question. I hate that like bullet.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I really try to avoid that. So it's a work in
yeah.
progress. A work in progress for
Yeah,
sure.
well, yeah, we can talk. We can definitely talk more on like the influences and how the podcast started and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think it could be
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to let it just go, or you just talk a bit more about yeah, your business and stuff like that, and what
Yeah.
you guys been working on. Or alrighty, well, welcome everybody to the Edge Rowing Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to say that our guest is Tom Clark. Tom's a former GB rower, been in the system through juniors into the senior program. You may know him from the Last Stroke Counts podcast as well. So I think they say it's the second best podcast in the world. Um, right next to this one.
Yeah.
And yeah, Tom also is I believe the owner and or director of Row Gear as well, which we'll get into all of that. Talk about the parallels between rowing and what you can learn in that journey, and then also with yeah the personal side of it and the other areas of business and everything. Tom, welcome on the show.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, we were just saying before, it's the first time I've sort of been on someone else's podcast. That's going to be interesting to be on the other side of the questions, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, until I was on the Last Stroke Counts podcast, like what, maybe a year or so ago, a while ago now.
More
And
like 18 months. Oh, yeah.
18 months, yeah. And you guys like I really enjoyed that conversation. So you do a great job with your show, and I'm trying to learn a lot from it as well. So yeah, you do a great job of bringing on guests and stuff like that and chatting to them and getting great insight. So part of my inspiration for doing this one as well. So straight after you listen
Yeah.
to this podcast, definitely go and check theirs out, but only after. But
Yeah.
anyways, Tom, what I always like to hear is how you got started into your rowing journey. So yeah, just talk us through kind of what that looked like, what some of that early inspiration was.
Yeah. Obviously, like everyone else, sport was a big part of my life. Growing up as a kid was very just did a lot really, did a bit of everything. My mum was great at just kind of taken us to every sporting thing. Anytime we showed some interest, oh, I want to try football, right? Let's get you in the football team, and she would drive us there. And her big thing was like, if you want to do it, you do it 100%. So it was
Yeah.
always we weren't allowed to like, oh, I don't fancy it this Saturday. It was like, right, you want to do it, you're going to do it properly. And then if you don't want to do it, we can go and do something else. But yeah, everything, swimming, football, athletics, cricket and rugby. I was lucky enough to go to a grammar school, which obviously is where I found rowing as well. But rugby was the big one for a long time. A lot of my family's Welsh, so that's sort of the
Okay.
religion. The dream as a kid was to play rugby for Wales. Um, and I wasn't a small kid early on, but when sort of puberty hit, I was a bit behind. So everyone started getting a bit
Oh,
bigger,
really?
filling out a bit. And I was just a
Tackles start
skinny
to
little.
hurt a little bit more.
Yeah, and I was just scared. Yeah, I couldn't deal with the physicality, which was sucked. I started going from first teams to second teams, and then as you do, sort of J14 summer term, I picked up rowing. Someone said because I was just a bit tall. I wasn't super tall at that time, but my dad was sort of 6'3", 6'4", so we kind of knew I would hopefully eventually be tall. I got there in the end.
Yeah.
So
How
yeah, I
tall
tried
are
it
you?
out. 202.5, it's about
What is
six foot
that in
seven.
freedom units?
Yeah, yes, 6'7", yeah,
Okay.
uh, which is pretty tall. Yeah, pretty
That's up
crazy,
there.
really. Yeah, yeah, it's good. It's good for everything except flying. Flying on planes sucks.
Yeah, you
But
know what
everything
is
else.
a useless thing to have is a massive head and a long face and a long neck. So like I'm tall, I'm 6'1", but my actual shoulders are, if you stand me beside somebody who's 5'10", our shoulders will be the same height. I just get all of my height through a long neck and long face. So apart from
Then go,
headbutting
go, go.
people, that's it. But anyway, sorry. Okay, so yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's quite funny sort of looking back. Then my first year of rowing, I refused to get a racing license. I said that I just wanted to row for fun. I didn't want to take it seriously. And then slowly but surely, like everyone else, it kind of the bug caught. I wasn't the best early on. I wasn't the worst. I was sort of middle of the pack. I think what attracted it to me was the individual aspects. The fight with yourself.
yeah.
Certainly in the single, on the ergo, those kind of things. Um, and it sort of felt like something I started to get better at as I came through J15. I got in the first boat. I mean, it was only a small grammar school. We picked up a B8 bronze medal at Nat schools, and that started to make me think, oh, this is going to
Mhm.
be the thing that replaces rugby.
What was it
Towards the
about?
end
You
of
were saying a bit earlier on about how you just wanted to do it for fun. Was there anything initially about the thought of racing that made you think it wouldn't be fun?
um, good question. Yeah, maybe. I think because we started in the summer term at my school and it was just messing about. I think I like the freedom. I definitely think as much as I loved team sports, there was all that kind of stand here, do this, wait for the whistle, you're in this position, you only do this
Mm.
thing. You compare that to just, 10 J16s getting in the singles and just flying up the river in the summer. And quite
Yeah,
often,
yeah.
I don't know if we should have had a coach around. Quite often we didn't have a
That
coach.
was, yeah, because when I used to coach like 11, 12-year-olds at the start of my coaching journey, kids loved it when they'd come down to the school and they'd have this kind of freedom and be responsible for an expensive piece of equipment as well. So I think they like being put in that position. So cool. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, we had our teacher, yeah, gave us a lot of freedom and responsibility. We had a few of us had been taught how to tie the boats down, and we were in charge of loading the trailer. And yeah, it certainly felt very different to a lot of the other sports that I'd done. Um, but again, like I think the real draw for me was that seeing the incremental gains, getting a PB, jumping on the ergo, and seeing
Hmm.
and getting a bit better. And I slowly sort of got to the top of my school, in my year. And then in my J17 year, there was only three J18s that rowed. So I spent the majority of that year rowing with the year above me, with three guys who were a bit more experienced, which really helped. Well, actually, it was actually a little bit before. That's my J16 year. I was doing a pair at Nat Champs, and one of their J18s pulled out. The J18s were doing a Cox and a Coxless four. and the coach pulled me in. So I won 9 o'clock in the morning. We did the J18 pairs at Nat Champs and we won it. And then 2 hours later, I did the J18 Cox Four and got a bronze. And then 2 hours after that, I did the J18 Cox's Four and got a bronze.
Bish bash
So I got
bosh.
three medals in a day at Nat Champs. I think that definitely kind of solidified in my mind that, oh, I'm good at this and I could do something with this. It was also a result. Me and my pairs partner were both Welsh, so that was a result that got us picked up to do home countries that year. So we did. It was 2005. We did it the first
Right.
time in Cardiff Bay as J16s, which felt cool. Everyone else with us is 2 years older. At that, looking back now, it's not that big a deal. When you're 16,
Yeah,
two
of
two
course.
years
It is a big deal.
huge, right? Yeah, and then that following year, I spent time with the guys in the year above me. I started doing some decent erg scores. I trialed as a junior. I never really got super far. Um, I got invited to a few camps and things like that. I didn't get to the non camp, but I did a couple of the Dorney camps, and I was kind of on the verge, on the fringes. My J18 year. Um, was a bit annoying. We qualified for Henley and then we hit the booms in the first round. So like the
Ooh, who
whole
was
sort of year,
steering?
yeah, Alex Huban. No, no, it was
Alex.
actually stroke caught a crab, and yeah, we just got drifted into the booms.
Oh, yeesh. Was
That
it
was
like
like
a
a bit of a
proper
letdown.
boat stopper one? Like, or was it just a little
Not
clip?
massively, but it was King's Canterbury. We'd raced a couple of times over the year. We were really evenly matched, so we knew it was going to go right down to the line. So once
Uh,
you've lost,
yeah,
10 seconds
you're
to
done.
restart, it was over. Um, I
What
then
was,
went to
and then
final
what, I'm
trial.
guessing, was this the year, years before the YouTube videos and stuff?
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, this is so that's my last year at school was '07.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
I did I did go to spring assessments in '07. I got my ass handed to me really. I didn't have a coach. My coach couldn't stay. I didn't know what I was doing. Didn't have
Yeah.
anyone to tell me what was going on. I didn't really understand heat racing. Come from like, my squad was like we had 10 guys.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna
there
say
wasn't
winning at schools and stuff like that, you must have had a kind of strong group in a small
It was a
program.
good group. It was a good group, and like props to Rob Gibson, my first rowing coach. I still would say he was, in some respects, one of the best coaches I had. He was fantastic at keeping a good squad together. He would run side by side eights for as long as possible. So as opposed to, it's a small school. It was a school of like 700 kids total. We had maybe 100 kids in our year, and maybe 10 that wanted to row. He pulled in some rugby players, so we had a good squad, and we did some good results. Like yeah, the J16 Nat Champs. Like obviously back then, same as now. Anyone who's doing junior GBs isn't there, but the standard was not bad. Yeah,
How
did
did
did a
that feel
final
that
trial.
first so your first trials, maybe a bit of any disappointment? How did that feel that first experience?
I mean, my entire uh, yeah, I went to Boston. I think Boston early ID trials. I came last.
Oh,
Like I
right.
mean last, like 167th. And Boston is like a 5 hour bus trip, and I'm the only one good enough to trial. So I'm making my coach miss his whole weekend away. We're getting in a bus on Friday night, just me and
You gotta
him. We're
do it.
driving 5 hours to Boston, staying in some crappy travel lodge. We turn up, we go up, all expectations. You look at the sheet, fucking last. I was never a big skull. I don't. Are we right to swear?
You
I
can
don't want to
swear,
swear too
yeah, I
much.
swear, it's okay.
Yeah, just dead last. And my memory of school was, yes, doing well in compared to who I had at school, like feeling like big fish, small pond, as it were. But in terms of going and trialing, was just disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And Dorney Lake was a good 3.5 hour drive home. And I think disappointment because I set my goals really high. I really wanted to do really well. I didn't always come dead last, but I talk to athletes. I mentor some athletes now, and I'm like, if you want to do well, like you're going to lose a lot. And we've talked
Yeah,
a lot about it in the podcast.
100%.
You know, the guy with the Olympic gold medal is probably the guy who lost the most. The
Yeah.
the the route to winning is is through losing.
Yeah, failing in training, like being
Yeah,
unstable,
and
falling out of the boat. Yeah, they're all things that serve
yeah,
you.
And I remember looking at some of the guys who were big at the time. You know, Phil Clapp was big in my year. Matt Roster, watching these guys do really well and go to Junior Worlds and win golds and stuff. And I look back and think it's God. I don't know now if I could have if I the motivation I had to keep going. You know, the amount
Mhm.
of times I kept coming back. The amount of times my rowing coach kept driving me up to Boston or this trial or that trial. Um, I remember we did a invitational trial in a pair at Caversham, and it was one of the first times my back went. We had to, I could literally couldn't row it in. We had to take the boat out the water at the top end of Caversham and walk it back. And if you've just come like 16th out of 17 pairs, and then you're walking the pair back in, it was just felt awful.
Yeah.
Um, but I think having had a bit of interest and having been invited to a few things, that's what really made me like don't feel like I'm done with this. You know, I think like maybe I want to keep going. And I think I know at J18, I remember sort of thinking like I'm not going to quit till I get some sort of GB vest. If that means that that's a master's GB vest, like then we'll keep going. But like that's really like I kind of put like a minimum aim on myself there. Um, and it was literally in that last year at school that Leander sent a little they sent a pack round to school for like the gap year um, project or whatever they were doing. So my coach said, "Oh, you know, why don't you have a look at that?" So I went down to Leander for a training weekend. They assessed me, looked at some scores and stuff, and said that I could come along. So it was quite a last minute move, actually. I had a place at Oxford Brookes to go to university. I obviously chose it because of rowing. At the time, they were not quite what they are now, but still a really good uni. Um, so yeah, literally sort of last minute thing. I got accepted really late into that. I actually remember it was Ben Lewis called me on the phone. I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
really know what was happening. I got a call from Ben Lewis. It's like, right, 1st of September, get your ass down here. So I was like, oh, shit, on. So deferred my entry to Brooks. Yeah, I had a bit of a summer off when I finished school, and then turned up at Leander as a 6'7" kid weighing about 84 kilos, I think 84, 85 kilos if wet. So
Yeah.
I'm now like 105 kilos and I still look skinny. So to think about, the all in one was sort of hanging off me looked like more like a pair of shorts than lycra sort of
Yeah, you're
thing.
still growing at that age. You're still
Yeah, big
growing.
time.
So
It
what
took
was
me
it
a
that
long
got
time.
you like did you pull an ERC score? Did you anything you did or were they mainly looking kind of at the height?
Yeah, I still the markers, the height, definitely. The fact that I was young, means, the more potential you have to go and to be fair, I think probably that Leander development program, I think it's still the same now. It's more open than people think. Pretty much anyone's welcome to join. Obviously they do look, they'll ask you for some scores and stuff. They don't want you to be out of your depth. They
Hmm.
want you to try and be competitive. But anyone's pretty, if you've got decent enough scores, you're welcome to come and have a go. That's what they said to us. Look, everyone's gonna be here for 6 weeks. We'll assess how you go and then we'll make some decisions. Um, yeah, my egg scores were what had probably got GB interested in me as a junior. I think my height really helped for the low rate stuff. So the juniors, you do the rate 24 2K.
Yeah.
Don't
Oh,
know quite well.
you'd have been perfect at that, no?
Yeah,
I think
that was my jam. Yeah, I sort of top five in the country or something at the time. That's what got them interested in me.
what do you
I
remember
just,
what you pulled?
it would have probably been around 630, maybe just under
Yeesh.
627 or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, I think I only got to about 620 free rate that year. But yeah, at the time that was enough. That was enough to be invited to some things.
How did you feel
Um,
going from maybe feeling a bit of potential or having other people see a bit of potential in you, you feeling like there's a goal that you want to hit, maybe having not as many performances as you'd like, coming last at trials and going into Leander, any sort of pressure or how are you feeling going into that competitive environment from a smaller program?
Yeah, I mean, I remember my dad talking about me and saying, you're going into the big pond now, and you're going to be a small fish, and you're going to have to get used to that. But that was how it had felt whenever I'd sort of stepped onto the national stage. Anyway, at this point, I'd really sort of caught the bug for rowing. I was sucking up everything I could get a hold of. Pinson's book, Redgrave's book,
Typing
Cracknell,
and rowing
Foster.
into YouTube.
Uh,
That was my
well, oh
go-to.
07, though, it's not really,
Oh
yeah, there wasn't
yeah.
a lot.
YouTube was only invented in 2005, right?
Okay, yeah. So
It's
yeah,
just
at the
cat
time,
videos
YouTube,
there.
just what videos?
It would have just been cat videos back then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that wasn't really a resource. I mean, my rowing coach again, Rob Gibson, he had a lot of stuff recorded. So we used to, he'd got like VHS of the. I remember we watched the 2000 race, the Olympics, '04. Once that had come in, we watched that one. We watched quite a few of the boat race. The
What
2000 was it
cruise?
'03? The closest ever was it '03? The year
I
when
don't
there was
know.
like a.
Boat race is boring for me. I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, so I really
What
I
cruise?
had.
I'd like to know which cruise were you watching from those Olympics? Do you remember?
Oh, right. So there's four, yeah. The Sydney four, the Athens four, just yeah, really that kind of thing. So obviously I found out about reg. I think Rob, my coach, he coxed at Oxford. He was a real fan of rowing. He was sort of a geek of it in a good way. So I sort of had a good education in that sense of was introduced to Steve Redgrave, even though he was a bit before my time.
Sure.
My first summer of rowing was like 2004. So literally I remember getting up and watching the Pinson race in Athens. It was like an early morning race, but just watching it. And it was sort of from that point I started reading their books. I used to read all Lance Armstrong's books. I got well into sporting autobiographies and
Yeah, they're good.
um,
What's your top three, top five autobiographies by athletes or sports people?
uh, such a good question. It's changed over the years. Early on, I really molded myself a lot on Lance and his mental fortitude.
Yeah, I
Um,
maybe need to read that
I
then.
really struggled a lot when all that came out. I was rowing in the squad. Actually, when
Oh yeah.
Tyler Hamilton did his interview and spilt the beans,
Oh
we
yeah.
were we were on an altitude camp in the senior team, and spent a bit of time sort of thinking like, Jesus, I've kind of I feel like I'm cheated almost, or he's cheated me, or something like that. Because the one thing I remember so much was he talked about when he gets up on race day and he looks out the window and it's raining. He's like, let's get it because he knows everyone else looks out the window and goes, "Oh fuck,
Yes.
like that. Oh, it's raining today. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't. Oh,
Start
I'm gonna."
whinging.
And straight away, you're like, right, I've got a win there. Hearing
Yeah.
Cracknell talk about training on Christmas Day, I was like, oh, I'm there. Like the opportunity to get one over everyone I'm racing, and I literally we did Christmas at my grand's house one year, and the cars. I've got brother and sister. So there's five of us in the car, two dogs, all the Christmas presents, everything. There's no room for the ergo. So that was the first time I actually took an ergo apart and strapped it to the roof
Oh.
because I
So
said,
you're gonna
I
say
said,
you made someone get the bus.
no, I was like, I'm training on Christmas Day. We're bringing the rowing machine. And I had so much support from my parents. They bought me a secondhand machine. I trained at
Awesome.
home, and they were
Makes a big
always so
difference.
supportive. Mum would send me off to every regatta with a cooler box of food. I'm not even joking, like just an unreal amount of food. I'd constantly have just be fed up,
What
literally
was the
fed up.
pre-race snacks? What were those? What were your go-tos?
So she used to do a really nice, it was like a triple bean feta cheese pasta salad.
Bean
Yeah, I
triple,
did a lot.
like English baked beans or like a boar,
Yeah,
like
so it was
kind of
like
a cannelloni?
yeah, no, it was like this can. It was like I guess it was like kidney beans, haricot beans, and something else, maybe sweet corn or something like that. And she would mix that up with pasta and feta, sort of had one of them, and some sandwiches and Jaffa cakes became my real go-to pre-race. That felt like something that was easy to eat without
Are they a cake or
like,
a biscuit?
oh, it's definitely a cake.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because everyone
I
knows
don't
because
care, but I
biscuits.
know English people care.
Yeah. Yeah, that became the go-to, just something that you knew wouldn't upset your stomach when you were getting really nervous. And I used to get really, really fucking really nervous. I
Yeah,
remember at Nat
me
Champs
too.
2015 before the final. I remember in my head being like, if I'm going to get any more nervous than this before race day, I'm going to quit rowing because this feels like
Yeah.
this is getting too intense now. Um, and I wasn't even the worst. I had a few friends that would always throw up before races and things like that.
Yeah.
uh, as a kid. And but like no one, there's no one putting pressure on me. There was no pressure from my parents
I
to
know,
win.
yeah.
We weren't a good school. There was no pressure from the coach. He obviously wanted us to see us do well, but I think I just constantly kept putting that pressure on myself, wanting to perform myself, wanting to not let people down. I think having like fantastic support from my parents meant I constantly was like, oh,
Yeah.
I need to make it worth it for
No,
them.
I relate to that as well. Cause see, my dad, he literally always said, he was like, right, Jack, like if remember, I don't want you to do like if you don't want to do this, it's not there's no pressure for me. And I'm like the actual fact that he was being more like he wanted it to be my decision to do it and to feel no pressure from him made me want to like do it more for him. So actually kind of backfired from him in a way. So in a good way, obviously, but having that support, it gives you even more of a reason to push, I think.
Yeah, I can't complain about it, but yeah, just in terms of where the pressure came from, I think it was always me, really.
Yeah.
But that, that's me, and I've taken that through, and I think if you can tap into it and understand it, then you're like, you can use it for good, like anything. It can eat you up or it can push you
Hmm.
forward. Sometimes it's all about perspective and things like that. Yeah, so I don't know where we were. Yeah,
Talking
food.
about
Uh,
beans and Jaffa
the,
cakes.
yeah, always had loads of food.
Books, but books,
Yeah.
Lance Armstrong's
Um,
book. You like that one?
Books.
Maybe
Yeah.
just top two or three or something, or I don't know. Well, you read the Pinson's
Yeah. I mean, with the
Pinson's book
original
is
bit,
really
like,
good. I like
yeah,
Pinson's
Pinson's.
book. Have you
Yeah. I
read
mean, he.
Tim Foster's book?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good one
Uh,
as well.
that,
Different perspective, but good.
yeah, I love that. Yeah. And that's the thing. I know we'll get into it later, but like I said, I've really become a bit of a student of rowing. I think it's just in my pursuit to be as good as I could be at this sport. I sort of accidentally became not an expert. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but really was just sucking everything I could up.
Yeah,
Every paper article. My gran was great at cutting articles out of papers, and like now when you've on Facebook, someone will like send you a link to a news story.
yeah.
My gran used to do that in like the analog version.
Oh
I
wow!
would get a letter at my house addressed to me, and you'd open it up, and it would be the newspaper clipping about GB
Shout
rowing.
out Gran.
Yeah, I know. So I had them stuck up on my wall. I remember I had one it was Jurgen on altitude camp with the four at the time, which would have been after '04. So like Steve Williams, Pete Reed, Alex Partridge, Andy Hodge. I had these guys like on my wall, like Tim Foster. I'd read his book. So to fast forward 20 years, to have those guys in the room with me, interviewing them on my own podcast was just like
Oh,
crazy.
cool.
Um, but yeah, so yeah, going to Leander, your question originally was, what did it feel like? I definitely, yeah, I was nervous. I definitely was like, right, this is going to be the most intense thing I've ever done. I was basically thinking it's going to be like spring assessment.
Hmm.
Spring assessments was the only reference I had of like elite level rowing, and it was like we were doing like 15 seat races a day, which is mental, 3 days in a row. But juniors, you just kind of keep going, don't you? It was
Just don't
basically a
stop.
war of attrition. At the time, it was like, right, we've got way too many kids, so we're just going to keep racing them until we work out who's left. Um, so I really thought it was going to be like that, and I turned up on the first day, and I won't say who, but uh,
Come
the
on.
manager. I turned up like a couple days early or whatever before training, and so the duty manager was like, "Oh, there's a couple boys in the crew room. I'll go and introduce you." So she comes and introduced me to these boys. I'm like, "Oh, what are you doing?" They're like, "Oh, come and look at this. We're looking at photos from Saturday night." And that weekend they'd gone out and played pub golf, so there was just photos of absolute debauchery,
And I'm guessing it was
athletes.
like printed off, right? Like
No, no,
the
they were on the Q computer just looking at these photos being put up, and I was like, I thought I was coming to like the most elite sports center like on earth, and these guys are just like, well, we got absolutely pissed on Saturday, and look, so
yeah.
look at that's a photo. Ah, that's funny. Um, and I didn't necessarily take away from it, but if anything, that probably took the pressure off a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, they're still human.
Yeah.
I'm not in a rowing club of machines.
I think I felt
There was,
like the first time I started to go spend time around coming from small program into bigger ones and people that were faster than me at rowing, I was almost kind of surprised in some ways at how non-obsessive some people were and how little they cared about, not how little they cared, but how much they could compartmentalize rowing. For me, I just like friggin' breathed it. So much so
yeah,
that Pauline, my wife, when she was rowing, she saw how obsessed I was and it made her be like, right, I definitely don't want to do this. I don't want it that much. But
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
okay. So
definitely.
like
I had to be all in. Or whether I had to be, or that maybe was how I felt I gained something over other people.
you
I think for
definitely
me,
do.
because like I said, I wasn't the natural guy that just rose straight to the top.
Yeah.
Nothing had come easily for me. I didn't have necessarily the natural talent, so to speak, but what I'd worked out is that I could work hard. And early on going to Leander and realizing that, okay, these guys row better than me, they've got better ergs than me. Some of them are a couple of years older, obviously, and I've got a lot to go. But I know I can work hard. So I'm just going to get my head down and I'm going to keep going. And I think probably not having a lot of early success is what kind of taught me that was going to be my superpower. And I from early on at Leander, I was like, well, you can be better than me, but you won't outwork me. Like no one's going to outwork me. Um, and I got really, I would, we would when we would do ergos, I'd be really sneaky. I'd always make some excuse as to why I had to start later or start in the second group so I could check everyone's scores and I had something to beat. So I would always make sure
Mhm.
Will Satch went off first, and I could look at Will's score. All right, I'm going to beat Will, and we were quite level that first year, me and him, and I was sort of constantly chase. I would kind of incrementally get close to him, and then he would have these big jumps. He really was a guy that like thrived under pressure, would do really well on erg tests. So I'd be like, oh, I'm there, and then he jumped again, and not
Mm.
just him, like everyone in that squad was doing a great job of pushing each other. We had a great coach, Brian Armstrong, who used to be performance director at British Rowing, was retired at that time, doing it for fun. But really, one of the best years of my life. It was I didn't have any schoolwork anymore. Sort of the idea of like I just row now. I had a
Yeah.
little part-time job at the cinema, but that was just a few evening hours. I remember we would sit there in the afternoon and be like, "Oh, this time last year I had double French. Like
Yeah,
we've got
yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
All we've got to do. There was no. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't rowed for GB. I wanted to, but there was no pressure. It was all like, what can I do? Everything else is out the way. I'm 18, 19 years old by the time we got into the season. Um, there was none of that sort of opportunity lost. I wasn't supposed to be doing anything else. It really was just like, let's have a go and see what we can do. And it was really free. I remember seeing an interview with Ayrton Senna when he gets asked about his favorite time in racing. And
Who's
he
Ayrton
says,
Senna?
back
Sorry, I don't know, and I'm sure some other people don't.
Ayrton Senna's F1 racer.
Right, okay.
F1 quite famous back in the day. He got killed on the track.
Oh
He was
geez, yeah.
one of the best, multiple world champion. Um, Fairly controversial, a lot because of what he did. Was he was the guy who went out to win. But yeah, they asked him what his favorite time racing, and he said, "Oh, back in Brazil in the go-karts when there was no money, when it was just about winning." And it's
Mm,
a funny thing. I probably spoke about this on my podcast. From that moment, from 2008, being in Leander, watching how well GB do in '08, starting to hang around some of those athletes, the aim was like, right, we want to get paid to do this. I want to make this
yeah.
my job. I've always wanted to be a professional athlete. I've got myself in the position where maybe this could be what we do. And that's what we chase. We were all chasing like funding. And it's weird to now look back and go, actually, that was the point where everything changed because you're not just having a go anymore. This is now
Hmm.
your job.
The obligation,
This is
yeah.
yeah. And if you don't do well at the end of the season, whatever you're on this year could be completely different next year.
I'll never forget
Uh,
the first time I got like a similar story. We had a similar journey. For the longest time, I had been working coaching part time to in order to train full time, like support from my dad and stuff like that, and Pauline, and it was yeah the first time I got the letter through that I had been accepted onto funding and support. The first reaction wasn't like elation or excitement. It was just a first like wave of whoa, just pressure because somebody else had invested into me and it wasn't, if I stopped rowing before that, my dad or whoever like would just be like, okay, like they'd be happy for me regardless. Whereas if somebody had now someone's put money into me and they're saying, you know, I hope that you achieve this result, it really did change it a little bit. But that was one thing I wasn't expected. Overall, it was still amazing, but
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, I
So,
still love it at the time, but you look back and go, oh, the freedom to just go for it. In that first year, that 07-08 season, such a great group of lads. Obviously, in my eight, so Will Satch, who went on to win multiple Olympic medals. We had Davy Jones, who won under 23 lightweight gold medal. Ray Poulter went to under 23s. I went to under 23s three times. Al Webb would have gone to under 23s, but um, he had some injury problems. Dave Bell was in the crew
oh, right.
who
Okay.
went on did the boat race and FISA championships and things like that. Like a lot of guys, but at the time we were all pretty young, hadn't really done much. There was
It's
a
an
bit of
important thing
pushback from
to, yeah, an important thing to remember, I think, for a lot of people maybe listening, where they think, oh, wouldn't it be so great if I could be, you know, fully funded or able to train full time or get to race across the world? And of course, it's amazing, it's great, it's a privilege. But, you know, a lot of the time looking back, the kind of fondest memories are when there are no pressure and expectations. You're just kind of having a laugh with people day to day. And, you know, as a junior, high school, or amateur, or masters, going away for a weekend to a race that's, you know, 2 hours down the road and staying at the same accommodation. Or I think kind of one of my fondest times as well when I was training was the 2017 um, Start Muppet Quad. Where we had like 6 weeks where we were pretty much always, I think we worked it out. It was like 95% of the time we were within arm's reach of each other in the boat, walking to the shops, in a car, sharing a double bed together, cooking dinner. Like it's good times, and you don't need that result there to. You kind of need to force. I think you kind of need to force in yourself to recognize that.
yeah, definitely. And anything, if you want to take something to the highest level, the fun is going to get reduced. You're going to have to start getting to the pointy end. Things change.
Yeah, that
But
was something I think was
yeah,
held
and I
against
think
me. Yeah.
the other thing which I probably loved about rowing is that whatever else was going on, even though I came last or I felt miles away from where I wanted to be eventually, I always had my own personal little challenges and goals. I always had let's see if I can get an extra 5 kilo on the bench press. Let's see if I can go a couple seconds quicker on the half hour. I love the half hour. Again, that just like leans right into me. I've got one of the longest stroke lengths of anyone out there, especially when you like bring it up to the
Yeah.
neck and get
What
up.
is your stroke length?
Oh, God knows. But I'm 6'9". I've
Big.
got a really long back. I've got a really long back,
Oh
so I've
yeah.
got a real good backswing. So yeah, the half hour 8:20 was my jam. Used to go out every week and just try and beat it by a couple seconds. I loved all that, and that's in 2007, my last year at school. My school had never got through a round of Henley. They got close, but they never got through a round. So '07 was all about, can we, of course you need a bit of luck, but can we big enough? Can we get through one round? And that was, I didn't really care what anyone else was up to. It didn't matter. It didn't matter that we weren't going to win the PE. We had our aim, and that was everything. And I went from that in '07 to 2008, winning the Thames Cup. And the aim being from very early on in the season to win it, but I couldn't there's no difference in terms of like my feeling of what I was going for. And I think
Hmm.
that's one of the best about rowing. You can be there to
Yeah.
pre-qualify, to qualify, to get through a round, to make the weekend, to do well at Met, to make a final at Marlow. Like it doesn't matter. For me, the feeling was always the same. As long
Hmm.
as you've got that aim that you're working towards and you're all doing it together.
Yeah, and it's like the
Yeah.
same when you get the first time, anytime you see your splits go down by one or two, and you kind of have that moment of surprising yourself, whether that's your first few sessions as a novice or towards the end of your career, more developed. Same with, I think the first time you feel the boat run when you're out as a novice, that kind of acceleration for the first time, feel that first new change feels the exact same as when you're, you know, rowing your best 10 years into your rowing career. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, the first pot you win, I'm as happy with that. I remember that as well as an international medal or anything like that. So, um, and I think again that's why rowing is fun to talk about and is accessible because you can listen to an Olympian talk about what they do on their
Yeah.
level, and
Yeah.
you can completely look it back to your level. And when I was coaching athletes, I used to, once you've got the basics, once we're getting the blade in the water, through the water, out, doing that, once you're doing that, I would stop them and be like, right, there are British Olympians at Caversham also working on getting their blade in today.
Yeah.
That's rowing. We're
Yeah.
all doing the same thing. We're trying to do it to a different degree, but it's not like a different sport where I don't know, I used to say compare it to tennis. Once you've got like a forehand, then you work on a backhand, and then you work on some slice or some spin. It's not. There's only one rowing stroke. There's no variation of it. I mean, sure, that's breaking it down basic, but yeah, it's so I think relatable at any level, but maybe the same for other sports as well. But I don't know. I haven't done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would agree that it is very unique in that way. And I would finish a session in the morning, be working on squaring my blade earlier or whatever, and then go and
Mm.
coach an 11-year-old who's first time in a tub single, and I'd be telling them to square their blade earlier. So yeah, a lot of the time it's yeah, the big thing that I think changes is how you handle nerves and how you view challenges in your mind. And yeah, I think there's really no limit on how you can far you can go with your mind and how good you are at handling external factors. How did you notice your change to your approach to rowing develop and change as you came from good rower in smaller program, last place at trials through to competitive at Leander and doing your first under 23s and everything?
I mean, yeah, again, like I wasn't really competitive. I was never really good in a single. I sort of say if sweep didn't exist, I never would have got anywhere. I don't know what it was about sculling or what made me better at rowing. But I always really struggled early on. So all the first trials and stuff, I never did really well. And then later on, when we got into sweep boats, I would do a bit better. Um, but yeah, I think I'd already experienced being at the bottom, and I was just like, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep turning up. I'm going to put my head down, and I'm going to work. And if I keep doing that, if I just bang my head against the brick wall enough times, maybe we'll get there. And yeah, that sort of happened through that first year. Like I said, we were lucky enough in that Thames Cup, eight, very young eight, but a really good group, a fantastic coach. Brian Armstrong honestly did such a good job that year of taking eight guys from eight different backgrounds and eight different clubs. We'd all been doing completely different things, and I sort of relate it. It was almost like a Mr. Miyagi moment. We literally spent the entire half of the first season doing double pause exercise, double pause, pause
Yeah.
the arms away, pause the body over, and it was all we would do. And I didn't feel like I had the ability to question my coach, but some of the other kids who Will had already been at Leander say a year. We had a guy, Ollie Partridge, was a few years older than us. So we're going to do anything else here? We're going to work on anything else? Like, all we're doing is to the point that we almost didn't understand it. And then we got to that summer season and we start racing and getting the rate up. And then you realize everyone's moving together. Everyone's body swing
Hmm.
is moving together. And the rhythm that that boat could then generate was
Hmm.
incredible. It was like that wax off, wax on moment when sort of
Yeah.
he doesn't realize why he's being told it, and then he kind of sees it.
That
So I think
back end
that's
movement, I think, is so important for it's so controllable as well. It's probably the easiest part of the stroke that you can have influence on.
and it's such. I think Brian was really, he's been in the sport a long time. He was great at just identifying. Look, I've got eight guys. Of course, they're good athletes, so they wouldn't be here. Of course, we've got the fitness, we've got the strength. That's all there. But I got to get these guys running together. And when we got it right, and the ladies' plate didn't, so we had a really good ladies' plate crew that year as well. Again, like some big names. I don't know if anyone know, but like Colin Williamson, Charlie
Yeah.
Burkett, Tom Wilkinson. Who else was out in that crew? Nick Clark, under 23 medalist, and some guy, there's some senior performances and stuff as well. Incredible crew. Yeah, if they didn't quite get it right and our rhythm was really on, we could challenge them, and that was an amazing thing as well to have an eight to do side by side work with. That's quite rare in the UK to have two eights of that speed. So we really worked with them a lot on camp as well, and they managed to win the ladies' plate that year as well. So the Sunday night of Henley with 18 guys and girls. Our cops was a girl, Chrissy, who've all trained. We were all at that club all year. There was no one parachuted in. That was two club eight. Yeah, it's Leander, and yeah, we had support, and I can sympathise with some other clubs who didn't like that we were in the Thames Cup, but we won that we won that final by 6 feet. We beat the Tideway Sculler crew by 6 feet. So everyone in that crew was 19 or under, apart from one. I feel like it was a development group, but it was a group of guys who put everything on the line to achieve that. Yes, we did all have jobs, but they were part-time jobs that worked around our rowing, and we lived on pennies. And I lived in a three bed I lived in a three-bed flat just outside Henley with five rowers. Two guys shared a room, and one guy was in the living room.
I can smell it
Uh,
from here.
oh, you can, yeah, I can still smell it. I can still smell it. Uh, that place was awful, but yeah, yeah. So that was amazing. That was amazing to win that. A huge moment that really felt like the first big thing that I'd done. Um, I contacted Oxford Brookes and said, "Can I defer another year?" And they said no.
Oh,
So I
really?
said, "Okay." Um, just we had some real humdingers with Brooks and Durham at the time. At that year was really big, 2008. But by the end of the year, we'd sort of put Brooks and Durham behind us. So I felt like if I was going to take my rowing further, I was already in the right place. My parents weren't very happy about it. Um, but at the time, I was like, oh no, I'm going to be the next Steve Redgrave. I'm going to get 6 Olympic gold medals. I'm not going to need a job. I don't need to go to uni. Um, like I said, I was all in, and almost I sort of felt like had this idea in my head that the moment I start thinking about life after rowing, or if I put any time, like
Oh,
a
yeah.
single thought of mine might go to not thinking about winning the Olympics, it's over. It's already over. I
Oh,
was
really?
that strict on it.
Military.
I wouldn't. It became a running joke that I wouldn't ever go out. Um, I felt like because I think I felt I lacked maybe in like talent, or I was struggling, or I was always at the back of the pack. I was one of the last guys in that eight. And I think that's another interesting thing is that when you're the last person in the boat, God, there's a lot of pressure. You've got
Oh,
to
yeah.
win seat races. You've got to perform. You've got to make it happen. And I remember spending that first 2, 2, 3, 4 years at Leander thinking, God, I wish I could just not be the last man in. I wish I could just feel safer earlier on in the season.
Hmm.
And then you get to that point, and then you realize it's good. It's nice. The pressure's off. But the best boat you've ever rowed in is the one you're the last man in. If you're last in, you're rowing with seven people who are better than you. That will always feel better than if you're one of the first one picked.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good way of looking at it.
yeah, and I sort of look back now and think, oh God, why couldn't I sort of see that and be
That's a really
like,
good way of looking at it.
what a privilege to be able to row in the best boat I've ever rowed in, as opposed to be the grumpy guy
Well,
in
it's maybe the
six
same
seat.
way. Yeah. I really like that way of looking at it because I think you can maybe look at it in the same way you look at racing in a single, or maybe like you at trials, it's you're going to be getting out of something a lot out of being around people that are better than you. So I just know coaching a lot of people, there's a lot of hesitation for a lot of rowers around entering races. Oh, I don't know if I have the right erg to enter brick. I don't know if I'm at the right level to enter the single in that race. Maybe I'll try a double or something first. But I think if you approach it in a lot of the ways that you approached it, where it's just internal and trying to get better, and always valuing that process of improvement, that something like coming last place in a race or being the last person selected in the crew can really, really help you develop. And if you view it in the right way, it's only going to make you faster.
Yeah, definitely, and that's like it's kind of a running theme. There's maybe a lot of things that you kind of look back and think, oh God, I could have realized that a bit earlier. I could have, I think there's been times when you've had people a few years ahead of you give you their advice, and you're like, oh yeah, cool. I hadn't mentally got to that point, but they had, and that again was a
Hmm.
bit of a motivation for doing the podcast. Was I talk about it almost in terms of like cheat codes. It might take you 5 years to work this thing out in your head, but you can then go back 5 years. And it's almost like you're helping yourself. If you're going back and helping an athlete or coaching someone
Hmm.
who you can see is in the position you've been in. An example I talk about was like coaching an athlete. We were doing a race. It was one of the early races in the season. She was one of my best athletes. She was stroking the boat. Uh, we were in between races, and I saw at the corner of my eye, I caught her. I watched her dragging her foot a little bit, but I saw that little drag, and I was like, "Your back's fucked. I know that. I've been there. I know what you're doing. You're trying to protect your lower back. I know, and I can see it." And I pulled her in and was like, "How's your back?" And she was like, "No, no, it's fine. It's fine." I was like, "Look, this race doesn't mean anything. I've been here. I've done that, and I've got it wrong. And I'm telling you, you're not going to race." And she was like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine." I was like, "I'm pulling you out." And that felt like, wow, like to be able to
Hmm.
help someone in that position. And that like was an amazing thing I found from coaching. But you can only affect the people you coach. With the podcast, we felt like maybe you had a reach. There was almost anyone might be able to hear that advice and help. And I made loads of mistakes. Of course, I made loads of mistakes. I came
Yeah.
from a small squad, and like I was chasing a lot, and I was definitely that guy that was working too hard every single session,
Yeah.
feeling like I couldn't take my foot off the gas at all. And um, I think again, looking back, I felt like I needed to be obsessed, but I maybe didn't understand. I think obsession is in like maybe different forms. Like there's one thing to be blindly obsessed, and like I said, that almost just bang my head against the wall. Just, there were plenty of ergos when I just let the form go, had the back crack over, and just, well, I've got to put a result in. And um, I look back now and I talk about obsession, about being focused obsession. It is about being obsessed, but in the right ways. It's
Hmm.
about being obsessive over how much sleep you're getting,
Yeah.
and making sure you're stretching and doing your core. And you can't just be the guy, yeah, well, I'm going to be the best because I'm going to every time. And actually, it takes more obsession, or it takes more commitment to step back, to not be that guy, to look after yourself, to put your hand up and say, "Oh, my
Hmm.
back's actually hurting today. Like, can I go on the bike?" I never felt, I always felt like I didn't have the confidence to talk to anyone about that, or mention on my back. And I struggled with it quite early on. Um, Maybe, one of the double-edged swords of having a long back and a long lever is obviously it's
Yeah. A lot to go
can
wrong.
have problems with it. Yeah, but I don't necessarily, I wouldn't say that it's anyone's fault. But yeah, so like being able to go back and sort of help people was great, I think, in terms of feeling like it was worth making some of the mistakes myself. But
What would you
certainly
say? Say if you had a paragraph to write to Tom at 18 or 19, what would you tell him?
it's difficult, isn't it? Because I look back and think it was my obsession of trying to get to the top that got me to where I got to. And
Yeah.
I think actually, people I can debate it, but I think I probably got further in rowing than my technical ability would have got me, because I made up with my mental attitude. That was the thing I always held on to. Um, so I think it would be difficult to say, "Oh, just take it a bit easier," because would I have got to where I got to if I
Yeah.
wasn't aiming high? Um,
Well,
but
if you were starting again, maybe what would you do it all the same if you could tap into that same mode of obsession?
hindsight is brilliant, isn't it? It's easy to say it at this time. I think the reason why I pushed the way I did is because I felt like if I didn't, I'd never get there. And being the nearly guy and just scraping into boats makes me think that probably pushing was the thing that got me further. But yeah, if I could go back and change things, I think I would just say, don't just try and take your time a bit more and look after yourself.
Hmm.
And Redgrave, when she was my team doctor, said something which I've repeated so many times, was like, you're the only person that's looking after just you.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, your coaches do want to do well, but your coach's job is to do, they're looking after everyone, and their job
Yeah.
is to produce a fast boat. You're the only person whose job is to just look after you, and you have to do that a bit better. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I probably, yeah, okay. If I had a son that got into rowing and was at 14 and wanted to do all that, I think I'd be like, right, okay, number one, we're gonna work on core strength, and we're gonna work on injury prevention, and we're gonna have much more of a focus on those things. And then the rest will come. The other bits will fall into place. but it's easy to say that now because I did well.
Yeah.
If I hadn't gone to under 23s, I hadn't ever got a GB vest, could I look
Mhm.
back and say, oh, I should have just calmed down a little bit and taken my time a little bit? And it's one thing saying, take your time a bit more and build up your strength before you get in the team, but you can't turn down an invite to Royal Caversham. You don't say, oh, sorry, I'll come next year.
No, you got to play hard to
There's
get a
no,
little bit, right?
huh?
You got to play hard to get a little bit.
Well, I
Eh,
mean, I
why
know
should I?
one that, yeah, but it's not going to work, is it? And
Yeah,
I
kidding.
think Will Waugh, I don't know if you know Will Waugh
I know
as
the
a
name,
guy,
yeah.
he ended up, yeah, he rode for Cambridge and Oxford in the boat race. One of only two guys to do it, I think. I think he got an offer to Caversham and he sort of said, oh, maybe next year. And it was like, you're not, no, that's not going to happen again. You're not going to twice. Um, so yeah, I guess, I don't hold anything against anyone. I think everyone there was trying to do their best, and it's hard, when you're trying to rowing requires especially the way we do it in this country, requires such a monumental amount of time just to get your training done. Being able to also spend time on core and spend time on stretching and have a job and make enough money to eat and have any sort of a social life. It's always a juggle.
Mhm.
Some things fall by the wayside, and I had some great support from early on as well. I had some good physios, and whenever I had back problems, we worked through it. When your back hurts, it's a very good reminder to do
Yeah.
your core, do your Pilates, and get on the. We
It's
used
the
to have one of
easiest time
those.
to do it, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd always
and
say
then
like,
again,
yeah.
yeah, go
I
on.
think the easiest time to do core is when you just get injured. I think the hardest time to do core is when you've never been injured, but then the second hardest time to do core is just when your back starts to get better and you don't have that kind of constant reminder. That's for me, and you're talking a lot about, looking back, hindsight's 2020. If you'd have that conviction and if you do the training required without, having had the negative experiences. So for me, that's what I learned through having a lot of back injuries was you need to do core before you need it. And then when you come back and you start to notice that you're able to train again a bit more consistently, it still needs to be there. So maybe similar to some mindset stuff I learned along the way. I don't think I would have learned what I feel like I can teach people now if it hadn't been for being so bad with my mindset. So
Yeah, the quote, "The man who never falls has no glory." There's no real glory in
yeah, it's
achieving
boring.
something without any setbacks. Yeah, yeah, and certainly towards the end of my career when I struggled more and more with my back, that I remember sort of feeling a sense of like, I'm having to turn up half an hour before everyone else. I'm getting physio every day. I'm on prescription anti-inflammatories. I'm on diclofenac for 6 months.
Hmm.
I'm having acupuncture twice a week. I'm literally having to like turn up 40 minutes earlier than everyone else so I can get so I can stretch my hamstrings enough to get in the boat and row. I'm in constant pain. And I was like, Jesus, how much am I going to have to give to this? It started feeling like I'm having to do more than anyone else just to stand still, watching other athletes get sort of come past me whilst I'm still dealing with my back problem.
There's
Um,
this one guy
and
I
I,
trained with, and he was so bad for mobility and just put so like, you know, um, no effort into anything else. Terrible sleep, like wouldn't fuel in between sessions, and then just go home and have like three massive pizzas, which of course there's nothing wrong with pizza. There's plenty of time for it with everything, but and he was just so naturally talented, and it was so frustrated. I was just kind of like. God damn, like I'm lucky that you're not doing what I'm doing because I felt like if you were, you wouldn't um I wouldn't stand a chance. But that's where you really do learn so much more about yourself. And I think that journey is just so much more fulfilling if you have to look to those areas. And I think it's something I feel like I probably talked about this on your podcast. But when I look back when I first got brought into the GB team, it was kind of underwhelming because I got congratulations, but for me, what I valued was the work I did to get there, not just getting like a vest. And it made me realize that it's only ever you that can realize these things, and you have to be clear on that.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then talking about learning about yourself, yeah, that first big injury is
Oh
that's a real
yeah.
moment. How
Yeah,
much do
you learn a
you
lot
really?
about yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. because that first year at Leander it felt amazing. I'm rubbing shoulders with Olympians, and like I said, we had this great year, great group. Um, I remember a time quite early on when I was sat on the ergo, and Steve Williams came. He'd just done 2008 Olympic gold medal. He wasn't training, but he'd just come in to do a session. Came and sat down on one side of me, and Ian Lawson, who did the single in Athens, sat down on the other side of me. I'm like, fucking hell, yeah, this
Yeah,
is wow,
it is
amazing,
cool.
amazing to be a part of and have all that support. And that's, I talk about, it's easy to want it when it's going well. It's really
Mhm.
easy to want it when the weather's good, the boat's running. But when the boat's shit and no one can really work out what's going on with it, and the weather's crap, and then you start thinking, well, now do you really want it?
Mhm.
And then you get that injury. My back popped in. It was a bit mental. I did 2008, we won Henley. I then got sort of up on the under 23 radar. 2009, I did under 23s. Um, I think that was maybe another marker that made me sort of realize that things were going the right way, and my work ethic was going to get there because I rode in 2009. There were two, I don't know about on the women's side, there were two guys that hadn't rowed for GB as a junior, and one of them didn't row as a junior. So I was the only guy in the team that was rowing as a junior and hadn't made it. So I was like, I've closed that gap, the gap
Mhm.
that I
Yeah.
that I hadn't been two or 3 years earlier. I've closed that gap and I've done that put myself in that position at Leander, and I've turned up and I've worked hard and I've just trained, trained and trained and trained, and that's a lot of it. And a lot of it is just putting those miles in and getting that base fitness and stuff. Um, but yeah, so I did that. Off the back of that, I got in a little bit of funding, literally a few hundred quid a month, but it feels amazing,
Yeah,
like
you're
anything
balling.
amazing at that point. And then that next year, I got invited on the senior altitude camp. So just before Christmas, I went on the senior altitude camp for 2 weeks. Then we came back from Christmas, and then that was the first year Shep took the under 23s up the mountain. So then I went up the mountain again with the under 23s and did 2 weeks at altitude. And then Mark Banks, my coach at Leander, had said, right, but you're not missing our winter camp. So then we came back. I had like 3 days off. I did a 5K test, and then I went straight on Banyoles winter camp. And halfway, actually, on my birthday on camp, my back popped.
Oh.
Um, so then I was stuck on camp. I couldn't row at all. I was in loads of pain. I went and I think they did like a CAT scan. They were like, oh, yeah, we think something's up, but you're going to have to get it checked out. Um, they didn't even have, there was no like watt bikes. There was like a spin bike with no screen. There was like a shitty spin bike with no screen in the main
I think
gym
we
that
all
I
know
had
the
to do the
ones.
main. So yeah, I'm on training camp on my birthday. My back's blown up. I'm sat on the worst spin bike you've ever been on, where the seat doesn't go high enough for me. So I'm like riding on a little kid bike, trying to do the rest of my training. And I didn't get back in a boat until the summer Leander camp, which we used to go to like 3 weeks before Henley. So I did that whole season. I was just in the gym on my own, on the bike. Um, wow. Initially, I was on the bike, but I tried to do all my training on the watt bike, and I got basically like a tendonitis in my knee because I'd never
Oh,
done that
nice.
amount. So then they said, "Well, try the elliptical." So I tried the elliptical for a few days, and that hurt my back, so I couldn't do
90
that.
minutes UT2. Are you doing 3x2Ks on the elliptical?
Yeah, yeah. I even did like 3x2Ks on the dyno
Oh,
press.
did you
Dyno
actually?
strength trainer. Oh, horrific. It's one of the most horrific things I've ever done. Try
Woo.
because I'm going to do all the training, right? I'm gonna do all the training. So I ended up basically then the only exercise I could do was swimming. Um, and they got the adaptive physio at the time was a guy called Pat Dunleavy, who used to be the physio for British swimming. So because I was sort of under 23s, they got Pat to come and do some sessions with me. So I was doing all my training in the pool, and then I started getting a really, really bad shoulder.
Ah, Tom.
I remember thinking, there's no other option. I can't go back to Anne now and say my shoulder's hurting. So for three, I was also Pat was unhappy with my swimming technique, so I had to have a pull float between my legs. So I was only arm swimming in order to keep my back up because when I was kicking, I was letting my back sink down.
Is that
You know, trying to
what
protect my.
caused the shoulder?
I'm basically only arm swimming anyway. I'm not really. I mean, you can kick a little bit, but you've got to hold the float between your
Right.
legs. Then my shoulder starts going. So for 3 weeks, I look back on this and think like, you fucking mental. For 3 weeks, I just ghosted with one arm. I just did zero pressure. So I just swam one armed, just ghost swam one arm for 3 weeks until it got better
Oh my
because of this
God.
just blind obsession.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff
Wow.
like back in that day. But yeah, and then because I was like, well, if I've got nothing else, I've got my mental strength. Um, and it's lonely. It's fucking lonely training on your own all the time.
I think the
I'm
worst parts
going
in some ways is watching everybody else do the training as well. And you're on the
and get
bike and
better.
they all come in from a 20K row and you maybe they're a bit down or tired, whatever, but it gives you a good perspective. And for me, when I was injured, it really reminded me of like how much I wanted it and how it was a privilege to be able to get out and train consistently. And yeah, you have appreciation for the benefit of it. So it's tough watching that.
Yeah, but that's real mental resilience, and you find out a lot about yourself in those moments. And there was a lot of songs. I remember Chase and Status and Plan B did the song. The lyrics are till the blood dries in my veins, till my heart feels no more pain. And I used to sit on the bike and tell to myself like how lucky you are that you're in pain. Because when you're dead, you won't be. And like there's other people that can't use their legs. So like what a fucking privilege that your legs are burning right now. Like don't you dare sit here and tell me that like you can't do it. Like yeah, and to sit and be at Leander and understand that
Hmm.
privilege. And that was a big thing. That was a big thing for me to be one day you won't be able to do this. One day your
Yeah.
body won't do any of it. You're so lucky. I'm so lucky that with what I've been given, I've got so many physical attributes that have helped me. Not everyone is 6'7". Not everyone has big lungs and a huge long back and levers. In so many things that I try to think of that and just be like, you're so lucky and you're getting
Hmm.
paid to row. How
Yeah.
many people would long for that? And maybe that was, even when outwardly there's a lot of people still doing better than me, and I'm not quite getting in the top boat, and I'm going to under 23s and I'm winning bronze medals, and that's amazing. But we're part of the GB system, and we're there to win, and that's almost maybe a difficult thing about being part of a really successful system is
Yeah.
it's you're going to win, and it gets to the point actually where if you win, you've achieved your objective, you've
Hmm.
done what you went to go to, you've
Yeah.
done it.
Yeah.
You lose, you've underperformed.
Hmm.
But there's almost no elevating
That's
beyond
true.
winning. Is just
Win by
it's just
more.
yeah, just like, oh, well done, job well done. So getting bronze was I refused to party after under 23s. I didn't party or drink. I said I'll party when I win a gold. Um, there was times really, yeah, where I probably didn't even just enjoy some of the wins as much as I could have, um, because of that. But then again, for me, it was like that was my obsession, my blind focus. If as long as I'll get back from under 23s and get straight on my bike and start doing some cross training. And um, there definitely could have been times when I like no idea what a deload week was. I mean, who in rowing does still? But
Yeah.
yeah, I just felt that's what I had to do. I wasn't the top, I wasn't the best, but if I just kept pushing like that, so yeah.
Yeah, wow. I think 100%, 100% that helped you and verging on the side of doing too much. I think when you're doing it on your own, when you're pushing, you're kind of in no man's land that it's almost better to kind of err on the side of doing too much than doing too little. And yeah, a bit of trial and error and a lot of mistakes if you don't have the kind of one-to-one guidance is I went through that phase when I was trying to get selected as well, where Pauline would struggle to get me. I wasn't doing any one-armed swimming in a pool for 3 weeks. So you trumped me on that one. So hats off. But yeah, no off seasons and stuff like that, which physiologically isn't beneficial. But it was almost maybe more of a kind of to be able to believe that you're doing everything that you can and to have that commitment. And I had this thing where I would try and be so focused on doing really random tiny things like really well to the like my big thing was like blueberries and eating blueberries consistently and for my budget unrealistic, way out of my budget. Like I worked at one time like 6% of my income was going to blueberries, and
Right.
but like I was like they're good for recovery. It's good for reducing inflammation. I'm putting so much effort into doing this one thing really well. I felt like that told my subconscious to do all these
Mm.
other things well because this objective is a high value thing for me. So um,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I've probably talked about this on our podcast and stuff, but there was that kind of 6, 7 year period that I was at Leander and in the squad. I mean, I didn't read a book, I didn't watch the news, I didn't read a newspaper, I didn't download a new song. I just was like, I lived, slept, breathed it. I mean, I used to row along in my single in the winters, and I used to at the catch. I would in my head, I would say to myself Olympic, and at the finish, I would say gold. And I would row for 2 hours, just saying to myself Olympic, gold,
really,
Olympic, gold.
10 out of 10
Just
strokes
trying,
every time.
just every stroke, just trying to just
Yeesh.
drive it in.
I have to say,
I mean,
that's a mental man. That's impressive.
I was insane. Yeah, I really like because I felt like that was. Like I said, I was like, but if I'm going to do this better than anyone else, I'm going to have the obsession better than anyone else, and
Mhm.
then maybe I'll get there.
I love it,
Um,
man.
huh?
Yeah, I love to hear it. It's cool. It's cool. I love
Yeah,
that. It's yeah, and
yeah,
you
it was.
definitely yeah, definitely
Yeah,
making
it
the
was.
most of like your time while you were able to get into the GB team. I think yeah, you can certainly look back and say, that you weren't leaving any stone unturned. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. And I think that, yeah, no, you did mentioning that. Like, I think that eventually, when I did walk away from rowing, I really could leave it behind me, and knowing that I really had pushed really beyond my limits. I'd pushed my back far beyond where it could go.
Yeah.
I'd definitely sort of broken through the wall. I'd sort of almost broken the safety switch. I definitely got to the point where mentally I could push my body far beyond its capability, and that also almost becomes a dangerous thing because then when do you stop?
Yeah.
Um, and I definitely remember doing sessions when I felt like I know this is going. I know I need to put a performance in today. Jurgen's watching.
Hmm.
I know to do that, I'm going to turn that safety switch off and I'm going to damage my body. But
Yeah. Your
decided that
association with
was me to
pain
do.
can change, can't it? It's hard to have that line. Again, this is something I very, very rarely talk about. I really don't like to talk about, but just like with me, like keeping at a weight was a thing, and part of that involved like hunger, and I definitely developed a very unhealthy relationship with hunger and viewing it in a certain kind of outcome way. So yeah, I'll leave it at that as well. I don't want to go into that too
Yeah,
much, but you definitely it can go down some unhealthy routes for sure.
I remember talking to Robin Dow, who I rode with at Leander for 1 year. He had a back problem and he rehabbed. He was a Welsh athlete. He actually got some support and rehabbed in the Welsh National Centre. And he was talking to the doctor, and the doctor was saying, "Well, what's the aim? What's your aim?" And Robin said, "Well, I just want to get back to a manageable level of back pain." And the doctor said, "Robin, the manageable level of back pain is no back pain. What we should
Yeah,
be aiming for, no back pain." But Robin had lived with back pain so long that he was like, well, if we can get it down to a 5, then I can
you're
carry on with my
laughing.
rowing career. Yeah, and you get through this kind of weird
Oh
psyche
my
of it.
gosh.
But again, I mean, on that point, look, um, we can all debate training and how it goes and all the rest of it. But at the time, the squad trained that way, and Leander was preparing us all for the squad. So Leander was a mini version of what the squad was doing. We really were copying it. And when I got into the team, it was difficult. It maybe didn't specifically work for me. It obviously worked for a lot of people. It works for the country. But I was still, I'd rather try to do a program that if I can handle it and I'm, successful in, I will go to the Olympics and compete for a medal. Then do a program where I never get injured, but I'll also never, compete for the top.
Hmm.
I wanted to be part of a program that was designed to win medals. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to just, again, being from GB and seeing all the success we have, you don't want to just go to the Olympics. You want to be on the podium. And then from my own experience coaching, realizing that when we have an aim and we want to go and win this, okay, we want to achieve this goal, which means I know we're going to have to train this hard. But when we start training this hard, some of you are going to get injured. And that was a difficult thing as a coach for me to realize that, oh, that feels like my fault. I'm getting them
Hmm.
injured. But ultimately, like if you've told me that's what you want, my
Yeah,
dream was Olympic gold medal, then I
that's the
want a
coach's job.
coach who's going to put a program in front of me that can get me there. And yeah, it
100%.
didn't work for me, but it worked for a lot of people. And I look back and think that, I'm still glad, I'm really happy that I did it. I'm glad I did it. Of course, I had some problems. Of course, I could have done things better. But yeah, like your point was, by the time I walked away, I was like, there is nothing more I could have done. There was absolutely nothing more I could have done. I gave
Good
my
for you.
life to it. Um, and a lot of people say now, oh, how come you don't still row? Are you going to get back in the boat and stuff? And I'm like, I did it. I did it. I gave everything. I put everything into it. And I'm happy. I'm happy with it where it is. And maybe I'll go, for a fun row and stuff. But I don't feel like there's anything left for me to do there. And
Mm.
that's been a nice feeling that you then get to go, okay, now we're going to go and do the next challenge, and that's fine. And I have friends who maybe didn't quite put it in the same way, who have that little niggling feeling of, oh,
Mhm.
what if I really committed?
Yeah,
What
you
if I,
know in your gut, don't you, when it's time and when you've done everything. Kind of question
well,
on
that was,
that when you
yeah,
go.
go on. No, no.
Okay, okay. Qu question on that then. I'm not returning because Alan's been on your podcast, I think twice now. You guys probably overlapped at Leander, and
Yeah.
he raised a point with me recently because he's been very open about coming back, and he did brick, and he got beaten by some of the amateurs, like really really good amateurs and stuff like that, and he loved it, and I'm so bad for not practicing what I preach and not, encouraging people to go out and not worry about the result. I would go. I had the hesitations to go back because I feel like me. I think it wasn't until Alan raised this point that going out and racing and not doing as well as you used to would take away from the achievement that you had previously as an athlete. So for you, was there any feeling of that? And it's something that really made me question it and motivated me to come back. And he talked about how there's a stigma around former elite athletes not wanting to go back to, yeah, take away from what they did previously.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I started to struggle when in the team I was struggling with my back and maybe not as enjoying anymore, but I sort of felt like I had to number one, I'm living my dream. I'm in the GB rowing team. This is my job. I'm living the dream. That sense of like, don't you dare complain about this. You wanted this.
Yeah, you feel
Here you
bad
are.
to complain, as you feel guilty almost that you don't appreciate it. It's a weird
Yeah.
position.
Yeah, get on with it. And then that kind of turned into, well, okay, but okay, well, if I can stick it out, okay, maybe my back's not going to hold out for the next 4 years. But if I can get senior world championships, then people will know that I was good enough, or it will be enough for people to know that I was good enough, or like everything I've put into it will be worth it. Or, I kept coming back to try and win that ladies' plate medal because I felt like, well, at least if I got the ladies' plate medal, then other people, and it all started becoming about not that I cared what other people thought about me, like not people I didn't know, maybe even just my parents and stuff, but it just I
Mhm.
started realizing that I was doing it for other people, or sort of had a kind of a moment when I was like, hang on, I've been in three ladies' plate finals. I think the verdicts were 6 foot, 3 feet, and 1 feet. Um, that was three finals in 4 years, three under 23 world medals, like do I need anyone else to know how good I was? I'm happy. There can't be that many people that have stayed on that level for that long. Beyond that, you're into who else was in the crew, who else turned up,
Mhm.
what was the opposition. I think I've realized, I proved to myself that I was on world-class stage, and I might not have achieved as much as I wanted to. But that was a big thing for me, being able to walk away from the sport and starting to stop sort of thinking about achieving things for other people. I remember when we talked to Loda Anderson, she talked a lot about this at Newcastle and really falling out of love with rowing when it started to become about achieving things so that other people would feel like it's so weird. You make up in your head. My mum and dad don't give a shit. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It was Jack Beaumont that even said that his dad had said to him, we don't care how well you do at rowing. We want you to be happy. And then you're like, oh yeah, it's not. They
Hmm.
just want the best for us, and that means they want us to be happy with what we've done. And so I kind of that allowed me to, feeling like I'd given it everything, and then starting to feel like I was happy with what I achieved myself, and it didn't matter, what it didn't this comparison to what everyone else had done didn't matter anymore. Um, so I feel like maybe I kind of at that point I was happy with it in myself, content with myself. I didn't worry about other thoughts of that. And I did do some, I jumped in a few crews. I subbed in for an Upper Thames crew at Eights Head last minute, and of course I did bits and pieces around the outside. I did some races and maybe didn't do very well, but by that point I think I'd come at peace with it. I think it's really hard when you're coming up because you're constantly measuring yourself off against other people.
Hmm.
Um, I've got a group of car friends, completely separate from our own group of mates from back home. We fix cars and stuff, and they started calling me Olympic Tom. They still call me Olympic Tom, and I was like, "You can't call me that." I said, "I didn't go to the Olympic. You can't call me that. I'm not that
Yeah.
level. Back in the
Yeah.
rowing world, there's this rank order, there's this
Yeah. Yeah. They don't
hierarchy.
care.
Don't wear GB kit if you haven't earned it. There's all these sort of rules and stuff. And they were all just like, you rowed in the Olympic team. You're the closest we'll ever get to a rower. We're calling you Olympic Tom.
And then they get on with
Um,
their day, and then they start taking the piss out
yeah,
of you regardless.
yeah. And you're like, oh, yeah, it's not really that,
For me, it
it's
was
not that big.
when I announced my retirement, and we went out the next night or the night after with Pauline and her parents for their retirement party, and I just had this moment when we were driving home in the car, and just really realizing everybody just gets on with their lives, and they're as internally motivated as I was. You still have, like you're saying, that kind of external comparison. And yeah, you really do realize afterwards how little people really care. Or they really care in the moment, and then they get on with their lives as well. So,
Difficult though, because like I said about you make your world rowing, it is your world, and so it does become everything. And from the outside looking in, you're like, it's only rowing. And you're like,
mhm.
it's only rowing to you, but I'm living it. The problems in my world are my biggest problems. That's all I have. So it becomes that thing. It becomes as important to you, even though it's not. And you can sit there and go, well, it's only a sport, but when you've dedicated that much of your life to it, it does become important. But yeah, from going back to it's not necessarily. I don't think I have the fear of anyone else sort of thinking that I wasn't good enough if I'd came back from it. I understand what Al means, and I've spoke to him about it a little bit as well. But again, it's sort of now rowing for me, or sport in general, comes back to like that own personal goal of where can I be, and now getting older, it's like how long can I hold on to something, whatever,
Mhm.
I'll never get a 5:53 again. But a couple of years ago, I got back on the erg and was like, well, I think I did like a 6:37, and then my head was like, oh, I wonder, if I put a few weeks of training in, what could I do? Could I still go sub 6:20? I think I pulled like a 6:17 that year or something. And that was fun. And it didn't matter, same like we talked about before, it didn't matter that it wasn't my PB. I'm in a completely different place now. I'm not a full-time athlete, but like, where could I get to? How can I be? So
Mhm.
that internal struggle. And certainly, I think having enjoyed that about rowing, when I finished rowing, I went back to rugby because rugby was something I gave up for rowing. And I really struggled with uh, even caring about the team. I've been so focused on individual performance. It's all about you. You focus on what you're doing,
Mhm.
obviously in a boat as part of your team, but you're responsible for just yourself. And then, we'd have a rugby game. I might personally have had I felt like I'd done everything really well. I had a great game, not missed any tackles, been really
Mhm.
big part of the team, but because the team lost, I was expected to be unhappy about it. I wasn't allowed to be
Yeah,
happy
I
with
had
my
that in
performance
hockey. I
because no, oh, what are you so happy about? We fucking lost. Like,
yeah.
yeah. And then I kind of struggled with that. And then that's when I was sort of realized, oh, as much as I had loved rugby in the past, I don't think team sports is going to work for me anymore because I'm only really interested in my performance.
I remember when I went back to
And that,
hockey and we got pumped 9-1 and I had a great game. I played well and I was like back in the car. I was like, all right, let's do like if we could lose by that much every time and like I felt good. I wasn't gonna lie. So I hear
yeah,
you.
yeah. And again, like in life, having moved forward on from rowing now, we've stayed in the rowing world, but like just keeping that mentality has really helped me, I think, and just stop worrying what anyone else is doing. Everyone's on a different timeline. Everyone's had different start. It's like that sort of analogy. We all start the 100-meter race in completely different places. So stop thinking about what everyone else is doing. Just focus on being better than you were yesterday.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. For
the
sure.
old adage, what is it? Comparison is the thief of joy and all that.
Yeah.
Um,
If you're not enough
it's
with
so
it
easy.
without it, you'll never be enough with it. I think I heard
I
Cracknell say
love
that
that
recently.
quote, John Candy. That's
Oh,
Cool Runnings.
oh, is it? Ah, right. Okay, yeah, because I heard it from
In
Cracknell.
Cool,
So yeah. Okay, yeah.
well, maybe he wasn't the other, but it's in Cool Runnings when because their coach cheated to win Olympic gold medal, and he finds out and he asks him and he says, "Coach, why did you cheat?" And he says, I lost sight of what it meant uh, to win, and I realized, yeah, that if you're not enough with it, you're not enough without it." And I think
Mm.
I think that's true with so many of us, and certainly with me for a long period where I'd pinned my entire life on winning an Olympic gold medal. When I win an Olympic gold medal, then I'll feel like enough. Then
Yeah.
I'll feel like
Yeah.
then I'll feel like I've achieved something worth achieving. Then I'll feel like I wasn't just another useless person. I've done something with my life, which is kind of crazy because it's such a selfish pursuit. Compare that to someone who goes off, a friend of mine
Oh
who
yeah.
who goes to be a doctor and think, oh, here's me saying that I'm special because I've won an Olympic gold medal. Um, and I really struggled, certainly like, when my back was hurting and having to pull out the sport. I really struggled with walking away from it, and it got pretty dark, and I got pretty depressed, and there was some, I spoke to the psychologist and stuff, and there was some pretty like scary moments, which I haven't talked a lot about, but there was certainly the pressure that I put on myself, and thinking, God, I might not achieve this thing, which I pinned everything, I pinned all my hopes and dreams on this one thing, and it's looking like it's not going to happen now. I don't think my back's gonna hold out. And I would drive, I would drive to Caversham and daydream about crashing my car. I would think
Mm.
if I just crash my car into a car coming the other way, and maybe I could just break my arm or my leg, and then I'd be in hospital and I wouldn't have to go to Caversham and the pressure would be off.
Mhm.
And then you sort of sit in your head thinking, that's a weird
That's not good.
thing. No, that's a weird thing to be thinking. But that pressure of it, and it's not something that happened quick, it really took a long time to be able to be happy with what I'd achieved and walk away from it. But yeah, looking back again, there was more support. I probably could or should have talked to more people about that, but
Mhm.
um, that wasn't something that
Yeah.
I was good at, not as good at communicating as I should have been.
Well, yeah, I still remember when I was there that it wasn't necessarily seen as it still wasn't seen as a good thing if you went to go and see the sports psychologist. And I think from the coaches, I don't know if they would see it from the mental health side of it or from the performance sports side of it. Stephen Feeney, who's done great mindset work with our group, and he's done some content and been on. You should have him on has he been on your podcast? Yeah.
No, I haven't. Yeah,
Oh,
I'll
you
write it
got to
down.
get Stephen on. You got to get Stephen on. He'd be a great guest. I'll ask him if he's.
Did he used to row? I know the
Yeah,
name.
he was so actually maybe a bit of a similar story to you with did some GB lightweight stuff and just pushed himself way too hard. So yeah, he'd be a great guest to have, but he talked about how he tries to encourage people and everybody to view mindset, sports psychology, and obviously just mental health in general is it's not something you do when you have a problem. It's something that you should do and check in on. And it's like your technique or your strength or your whatever. Like you can make it better even if you already feel like it's good. But when I was there, at least it still felt like that was you go to them when there's a problem and it was who knows if it was true, but it felt like there was a bit of a flag, like, oh, Jack's gone to the sports psychologist. Like, I don't know if I can count on him to go and win a gold medal. So, um, it's a
Definitely,
tricky
yeah.
position.
Yeah, no, I felt the same way. And even speaking to the psychologist at the time, I was talking about feeling isolated or or cut off or maybe being treated slightly differently or whatever. And he was like, yeah, everything you're talking about is going to make you feel bit shit. And I was like, well, is there anything we can do about it? And he was like, no, nothing's going to change. It's the way it is, and that was how it was at
Bullshit.
the time. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah. At the same, I can't expect the whole world to move just because I'm the only one having a problem. But I don't think I was,
But the
and
sports
hopefully,
psychologist should have been able to do something there. I
I
don't know.
mean,
Like, see
I
the one I
mean,
spoke to when I was there. I don't know if I would throw their name out if I remembered it, but they were on the call and they had notifications pinging off, and it would literally there was a noise like it was on a Zoom call and it would ping and they would go, and it wasn't just like it would like it would go and then they would like read it, and here I am trying to like friggin' pour my heart out, talk
yeah,
about like
yeah.
these like things. I was like, right, okay, this is not working.
It was, I even on the physical side of things as well, watching my physio at the time having an argument with the coach, physio was like, look, his markers are bad. He can't go out. Coach is like, well, we've got a pairs matrix. Yeah, he's got to
Yeah.
row. He
Yeah.
can't row. He's got to row. Again, why? How come the medical team are arguing with the coaches? But again,
Yeah.
the coach, we're not trying to be good rowers. We're trying to be the absolute best in the world at a high level Olympic sport. The coach has to push. That has to be their
I
job,
don't
and
know.
it's a
It can go
tightrope. I mean,
wrong. It does. They do have to push, but I think they need to have an understand. It's hard. It's like being a teacher or a doctor. You have
mine.
influence, and you're not dealing with. It's not like the adult in the situation can just be like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to decide not to do the pairs matrix." Like you have leverage over them and their career and their dreams, and I don't think it's maybe seen like that the coach should be held a bit more responsible for how the athletes are treated.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there were certainly times I felt not just in the team, but just in general in my career when you're getting treated a little bit like a kid, and you're like, hang on, given my life up to be here. Give me a
I
little
hated that
fuck.
when some
Trying
coaches
to
would.
I'm not trying to sneak out of a session. I'm not trying to
Yes,
giving up everything to be here. But then again, how many times has that coach seen someone do that and has had to push someone out? How do you know if you've got that athlete
true.
who does want to be there, or you've got that athlete that needs a bit more? And like I certainly had a lot more sympathy or a lot more understanding for coaches when I did a bit of coaching myself. I coached when I finished in the team. I coached at Leander as an assistant to the juniors for well, I did one season, then I sort of did a finishing coach the next season, then I did a bit of coaching at one of the colleges, and it's hard. It's really hard. I really struggled as a coach, and um, I struggled with man telling people they've not made the crew.
Oh yeah,
Telling someone that they drop. Trying to get things right, being obsessed with not making the wrong decision, probably doing too much seat racing because I just didn't want to be. I wanted to make sure that I had it all on paper and I could show everyone the results. And I didn't want to be that coach that was just like, no, I can see, I know, I want him in the crew. I put a lot of pressure on myself with that. And I probably mentally, in my mental health declined a bit as coaching when I started slipping in again into
really.
this attitude. Oh, well, maybe I didn't win Olympic gold medal, but if I can produce some athletes that go in the GB team, or if I can coach, and then maybe I can show other people that I was good
Yeah.
enough. And this was such a negative place to be, and I really struggled with that pressure again. Started putting so much pressure on myself um, to do this, and the coaching at college, my athletes at the time, most of them were just trying to have fun, and yeah, they wanted to win, but they were having a laugh, and I'm putting so much pressure on myself, and that's another
Mhm.
reason why I sort of stepped back from it. But again, like talking about all these things, like yeah, they're hard. Having those mental struggles is difficult. Coming through injury is difficult, but I've gained so much mental strength having done it, and I deal with life so much better now because of those things.
Yeah.
Um, Even when I'm having a really hard day, I'll quite often be like, "This sucks." That's not half hour 8:20, is it? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not that bad, And
It's
I've
not one arm
been there,
swimming for 3 weeks.
right? And it's like once you put yourself in those really tough positions and you find out what you're made of, and you think, I got through it. And every time you
For
get
sure.
through it, there's that little bit of more mental fortitude. I think callousing the mind is the
Goggins.
God talks about it, yeah, and it does, and then you start to get to this point where you're like, oh, really, I said I could do it, and I did, and we did that again and again and again, and now I really believe in myself. I believe in my ability to achieve things, and moving on from rowing into business, having that like belief in myself that I'll find a way. It might not be today. We might have to change the plan a little bit. Whatever has to change will change, but we'll get there and we'll make it happen. And it sounds stupid, this sort of thing, like, if you hear someone say, if you believe it enough, you can make it happen. And it's not, it's more than that. You can't just sit in your bed and believe you're going to make it and it will happen. But if you believe, that it's possible to find a way, you can almost start to manipulate, I think, the world around you.
Yeah,
And
100%. I'm literally, this is something I've been getting into a little bit more with business, and my business coach actually was big and got me onto this, with the belief side of it and almost the manifestation side of it. But it's so true. I'm literally reading a really, really good book on this right now. Mind Magic by Dr. Jim Doty. I'd highly recommend it if you like that stuff. But they break
yeah,
down
I'll
the
read that.
science of belief and what happens when you imagine and visualize and believe in something happening, and the positive emotions alongside that is your brain just you're embedding the intentions to get that outcome into your subconscious, and it's super cool. It's super interesting. But
Yeah,
it's
I think I
it's
like Alex Hormozy a lot. Listen to a lot of his stuff,
oh
and that
yeah,
one, there's two outcomes to every problem. You either solve it or you quit before you solve it. And then
yeah.
you realize you get a problem, and okay, well that didn't work. So okay, I'll go away. I'll have a coffee. Let's have a think. Or maybe I'll try that and go back.
Mm,
We'll have a try. No, that didn't work. Okay, well let me check that. Or let me go on Google and see if anyone else has had this problem. And then if you just keep stepping through the gears,
mm.
eventually you can find a way, and that starts to give you real confidence. And yeah, applying so much of what I did to sport to business, having taken on row gear. So I started going back to saying that I didn't need to go to university. My dad was like, you need to do something else. So 2009, a guy who used to work for Concept 2, called Rick Colburn, was selling row gear. He'd been running for a couple of years as much sort of smaller than what we're doing now. But Dad basically helped me buy that business in '09 and helped me get it all set up. And
Cool.
it worked really well around my rowing because obviously I could set my own hours and stuff. But it ran really small for a good few years. We always said it would
I
just
didn't
use it
know
as a
you had
job.
it since then.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
'09. So yeah, it was really part-time, really small. We just did mostly to start with, just bought, refurbished, and sold again. I didn't really do any like servicing or anything like that. But slowly and surely we got into it more. Um, but yeah, it was starting to apply those things from rowing to business, and realizing that it is very similar in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing
when I
I think
finished
I learned is, I think really is when you're, maybe two things, when you're looking at a massive task and you know how much work it's going to take. And then you also don't know if when you finish it, it's actually going to work and it's going to be something that is useful to people or whatever. To the ability to kind of just like jump in and take one step and then the next one and have that delayed gratification. I've just noticed that it's like a lot of things in life. The longer you have to go without getting gratification, often the better it is when it's done. And I would just think back to my days when I was at Strathclyde Park, training on my own, February, crosswind, pissing rain, 3 degrees Celsius, and having to pull the cold chain to get into the boat bay. And then slowly it just slowly goes up like that. And I feel like I kind of learned this reflex to be able to kind of just get on with it, to be honest, that it's there's so many parallels. There are so many parallels to to what you learn in rowing, that repetition.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people now we do a bit more social media now, so it's quite easy to see what we're up to. And a lot of people will comment like, "You guys are everywhere! Like you bloody working so hard." I'll be quite funny
Oh yeah.
every time you're in the gym at 7 p.m. fixing row machines. The owner will come up to you and be like, "So it's your business, is it?" And you're like, "Yeah, of course it is." I'm in here at 7 p.m. still going, but it doesn't feel oh, how come you can work that hard? It's like, well, what do you mean, how come? We all used to row. We also
Yes,
used,
it
used to,
is.
work our absolute bollocks off. It's not that hard to, and again, like these days, getting up at 5 a.m. to go to work is a lot easier when all that requires you to do is sit in a warm van and drive to a
Yeah,
gym.
a
That's a
warm
hell of
van.
a lot easier than the idea of getting up and I don't have to go out on the water anymore. I
Hmm.
remember
Yeah, it's
what the
warm.
realization when I retired from rowing. I remember very vividly thinking, I'm never going to have to go outside with not enough clothes on again. Like whenever I can just wear what I can just be warm.
Yeah,
I've
so many
spent
the
the last
biggest
10 years of
jackets,
my life
boots,
being cold.
gloves.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
I know that's one thing I remember. It was like, not that I don't like being like, oh, I had to do it or whatever, but I remember like, oh, I'd planned to go rowing one morning and the weather turned shit, and I was like, oh, right, I don't want to go, so I'm not going to go. Um, that was a big thing, but yeah, like doing six in terms of like the content side of that and keeping that going, like having a conversation like this or editing it afterwards, or a couple posts on Instagram a week, that's a small amount of what we do, and it's not hard. It's not, just do it, like and I think
yeah, and
I'm a big believer that coaches that haven't had that elite experience are missing out. You can still be a great coach, but if you've not had that experience to the elite end, I cannot believe that you can teach the same lessons if you haven't been on that journey yourself. There's so much value I've gotten from doing it myself. It's so invaluable. I'm so proud of like the journey, and obviously you are as well.
I am now. I wasn't for a long time. I wouldn't talk for a long time. I wouldn't talk about my rowing. I felt like if I maybe criticized anything or anyone from my rowing, that I would just be labeled the guy that didn't make it.
Mm.
Oh, well, of course you weren't. Of course you weren't happy. You didn't
Oh,
make it.
really?
Um,
Sorry
and I
for that
felt very
assumption then.
Huh? No, no, it's
Sorry for,
fine.
yeah.
I mean, I think I feel like that now, and that maybe comes across now as why.
Right.
And
Yeah.
a lot of that is the podcast. But there was a long time which I didn't want to talk about my experience. I didn't want to share it. I felt like I was not good enough. I felt like almost a failure. I hadn't got that Olympic gold medal. And that's how other people would see me. And that was kind of really Pete, I know who I do the podcast
Yeah.
with, who some will or won't know, but I met him originally. He was a junior at Leander when I was coaching, and then he begged me to come and work. He wanted to get some work done, to come to work for me, and he had a fantastic work ethic, and he never said no. And he said, "Oh, can I come and work with you tomorrow?" Well, we're going to have to leave at 5 because we're going to Chester. Great, I'll see you at the van in the morning. It's like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
this kid wants. Kept turning up, kept working hard, and so we're driving around the country all the time talking about all these things. To him, I've achieved a lot. He did well. He didn't do as well as I had, so he loved hearing all the sort of stories and the things that I'd learned and the lessons I'd learned along the way. And we spent hours and hours just talking to each other in the van to and from rowing. We both loved rowing. We were both sort of fans and geeks of it. And he was like, "We really, we should talk about this. We should, you need to
Oh yeah,
get
is
your
that how it
advice out. You
started?
talk
Cool.
about it." And I was like, nah, no one wants to listen to me. No one wants to listen to the guy that never made it. I'd never put myself, even when I was at Caversham, because I was at Caversham, but I never went to Senior Worlds, and I felt like I was less than the guys that had. And I really, again, a lot of this was probably my own fault, but, or that, I felt that if I'd ever felt like I'd made it, then I wouldn't keep pushing. I think maybe there was this sort of a
Yeah.
psychology of like, making myself feel like I really needed to stay on the front foot. But yeah, we sort of did this for a lot. I mean, we did one job in Cambridge where just for a laugh, Pete recorded it and we just like did a little sort of mini chat almost. And then he kept pushing, and it took him about 18 months to convince me that anyone would be interested in anything I had to talk about. Um, And I was like, fine, okay, fine. You buy the equipment, you set it up, you do everything because I don't know any of this. I'm not very technical. We'll do it. But I'm only speaking to my friends. We're not talking to anyone who I wasn't like a close mate with when I rode. So when we start, it was John Collins, Al Sinclair, people I'd rode with at Leander or in the under 23s. And slowly but surely we got bigger guests on and people, just kept treating me like an equal. I kept expecting them to talk. I don't know. Well, why would, but in my head, I'd made this up, they're going to talk down at me or they're going to think that I'm not um, good enough or I wasn't where they were. But continually, they keep speaking to me as an equal. And I almost realized it during those conversations that we were in so many. I didn't go to Worlds, but we were both on that same senior camp. We both suffered up the mountain, or we both suffered in
Mhm.
Portugal, or we both struggled with back injuries. We had the same physio, the same doctor, the same coaches. So many similarities, and that really sort of made me realize that no one was going to treat me any different. And I think that again, like sort of solidified that in my, I'd say, I know I'm good enough, but
Mhm.
maybe no one else does because I didn't have the medals or the achievements to prove it. But that wasn't the case. And we stepped out and we started getting, I mean, the first, when we got Alex Partridge, we went to his house, we spoke to him, went to his house and did the podcast with him. So he finished in 2012. I started in the team in 2012. We've been on a couple of camps together, but I was an under 23 on a senior camp. You sort of
Yeah.
kept apart a little bit. Going into his house and setting the podcast stuff up and thinking in my head, I used to have a newspaper clipping of you on my wall and like being this is crazy to sit down and talk to you. And the other thing about the podcast is you don't even talking to my friends, Al Sinclair, I started at Leander at the same time, great mates. And I know his career well. I've followed it the whole way. He's a friend of mine, but you don't ever sit down with your mate at the pub and get to just ask any question that you want to ask about rowing and have them have to answer it. You wouldn't. They'd be like, fuck off, mate. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, yeah,
So you really go into like a level of detail with other people which you otherwise wouldn't see. And I think I took our style of podcast. I took a lot of motivation from the long format of Rogan. Um, I noticed that there were guests he had on which I had formed an opinion of based on what I'd seen. So one example was Dan Bilzerian. From what I'd seen of him, oh, he's just this playboy, rich kid, trust fund, whatever. And then you actually hear him sit down and talk about his life for 3 hours, and like, oh, this guy's so different from what I'd been seen or what I'd shown. I think there's other thing, Jordan
that's
Peterson,
interesting.
Goggins, those kind of people. If you form an opinion of them from the sound bites and the TikToks, it's very
Yeah,
different to if you really sit down for 3 hours and really get into that person. Media in general has spent so long being able to be more polished, bigger budgets, better cameras. Everything's got sort of more polished and perfect. And we
yeah,
got to that point where it didn't feel real enough. And that we've almost like snapped back the other way. And it's like, we don't want the perfect, polished 20-minute interview. We want
yeah.
the nuts and bolts. We want to hear the
You want to know
struggles.
your
And
shit.
yeah, but then yeah, so then another thing was, I'm interviewing John Collins and I'm sat the other side of John Collins hearing him talk about how he thinks he's not enough because he went to two, no offense to John, but he went to two Olympics, but he didn't get a medal. And I'm sat there going, mate, I'd kill to go to, if I went to two Olympics, I
Yeah,
would feel like I'd done enough. And it was the same with, with talking to Al or and thinking, oh God, we're all of us. Maybe it's inherently part of
yeah,
what makes become athletes is we all feel like we're maybe not enough. Um, and I mean the crowning glory was then when we started getting Olympic gold medalists on who would talk about feelings of inadequacy or not, and thinking you did it, and then you're like, oh, this is a universal thing. This is something that we've all silently been struggling with, and me personally for a long time, like really not talking about my journey or struggling mentally at times and going, right now, actually, this is something that maybe I didn't even realize the podcast was going to be about. But what it's going to like, what we're going to do is we're going to hopefully try and show everyone else that this is a universal struggle. Again, it's something now I talk about with with those that I mentor, it's a stupid way to say it, but someone will talk about having a struggle or struggling with this and that, and I'll go, okay, number one, you're not special. There is nothing special about what you've just told me. The struggles you talk about is what everyone struggles with, and I've heard it from Olympic gold medalists, and I've heard it from people who rode at every level, and coaches and coxes and everyone that we've had on. And then I was like, this is crazy. We're all struggling with the same things. And whilst we're all busy struggling with our feelings of inadequacy, we're not focusing on becoming better athletes as a rowers and later in life becoming better people. So I'm like, right, if we can actually start to make people understand that it's not a problem and it's not something to ponder, or you shouldn't get stuck on it. Maybe we can actually have an effect on rowing. Maybe we can actually get the next generation of rowers to bypass these things that have held us all back in order to then step on to the next level, because they're not worrying about, they're
Yeah.
having some mental fortitude that's taken us all 10. We've all learnt it. It's all taken us a really long way. We've gone the hard way. We've done it all by our own. None of us talk to each other about it, but we've all had these problems in our heads. And if we can share all that out, then
Mm.
maybe we could like literally not. I don't mean it in like not because I want any praise for being a part of it. I don't even care if no one ever said anything. But like,
You're doing a
if I
great
could
job
even
with
have,
it.
yeah, if we could even have an effect to like push on the sport, or if I could, a lot of my sort of thought in the content we produce is like, what would I like to listen to as a kid? What would that 14-year-old kid that had got obsessed with rowing and started
Yeah,
trying to
yeah, yeah. Same.
all the information I could find, what would inspire him or what would help
That's
him.
why I always ask for erg scores. Anytime people are like, "Oh yeah, I had to pull this erg," and I go, and I'm like, "What score?" Because I know there's some nerd out there who's like, "Tell me the numbers." So yeah,
Yeah, and I think a lot of the reason why the podcast seems to work, or why our guests, I think, feel happy to talk about their experiences and the good times and the bad times, is I think I kind of strike that balance between I was a good athlete. I did row at a high level. I can relate to you on what we're talking about, but I'm also like a fan. And I'm also really excited to hear, like one thing, when we talk to Olympic medalists or people who go to the Olympics, like how did it feel? Like I want to know how it felt, and I want you to tell me, and don't hold back, and don't, like goes back to this kind of ranking thing of, oh, you don't want to sort of show off too much or whatever. And like, no, I
yeah.
want, I want to know that gold medal felt amazing. Like when we spoke to Tim Foster, he's obviously done this bit before. He's done a lot of public speaking, but he started setting it up. He was like, I'm the kind of guy that thinks about it a lot, and I'd envisaged putting the medal around my neck, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what that would feel like. And but when it actually happened, I must admit, it felt about 100 times better. He set it up, make it sound like he was going to say it didn't live up to it, but it was like
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And you're like, well, I want to know that. I want to know that. I want
yeah.
to know that it feels that good. And for those that don't, like that relatableness of like, allowing yourself to revel and enjoy a win. I really get annoyed when people don't enjoy a win.
Mm,
When I'm coaching people, get a PB on the
yeah,
2K, PB and not happy with it. I always say, like, don't tell me that you're not happy with the best you've ever done. That's the
yeah,
best you've ever done. I don't care if
yeah.
you wanted to do it better. You've just done the best you've ever done.
I was
Go
on a
away and be happy.
technical, we were doing a technical workshop last night on a workshop, and pretty much everybody, they'd made a big progress with their technique, and they're like, but you know, yeah, that got better, but now, and they're just immediately on to the next part. And I'm like, look, let's just pause for a second, revel in that. And I think people are afraid to kind of let their ego take over, I think, a lot of times. And
Because
part of the
to
coaching is just like let that sit there and let that kind of grow and kind of just think about that a little bit more, because you're just teaching your mind to seek more of it, but just by doing that.
yeah. Yeah, again, like a lot of this is through the podcast. I've learned so much about myself, about mental strength and things like that through the podcast, through talking through these people, and it's a common thing that comes up a lot. And for me, it's two things. One is I think we feel like the moment we give ourselves a pat on our back, we won't be able to continue
Yeah.
chasing it. There's a sense that I can't keep wanting more, yet still be happy with what I have here.
Yeah, that was a big thing for you. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, well, is it the hedonistic treadmill? You know, the goalposts keep moving. And I think it's you your progress is measured a step at a time. But if you're only ever looking up, all you ever see is the rest of the staircase, right? I keep going up, I keep taking the next step, but all I keep looking at is I've got the next step, then there's a next step, then there's a next step. You know, oh, I'm an under 23 now, but I want to be a senior. Well, I'm a senior now, but I want to go to the Worlds, and then I want to. But we never sort of say to people, literally, turn around and look at how many steps you came.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, it's important.
no, another thing that really helped me when I retired from sport, that sense of feeling of inadequacy or failure from the ultimate goal. I remember sort of thinking, all right, like you didn't get the Olympic gold medal, right? But imagine if you could get in a time machine now and go back to 14-year-old me, to that kid that just, you know, was just obsessed and loved it. And I could go down and sit with that kid and I'd go, listen, we're not going to get the Olympic gold medal, but we're going to win Henley. We're going to get 323 world championships. We're going to be a professional athlete. We're going to get
Hmm.
paid
Hmm.
to row. That fucking kid would lose his mind. So
Yeah,
why am I sat here now going, oh, but I didn't get that and I didn't get that?
yeah,
Like that kid would lose his mind. And I've helped, I've taken that thought experiment to a few friends who were also struggling, and then they've said that, oh yeah, you're right, you know, so busy thinking about the things that I didn't achieve, completely
right.
forgotten about all the things, you know, and how many people, you know, how many rowers would kill to win Henley? You know, what a
Yeah,
privilege, what an incredible at 19, what an incredible experience. Like to do that with a group of guys that I'm still friends with. Literally 2 days ago, I had our Cox, Chrissy, has just turned 50. So we did a Zoom call. Half the crew went on, and some of those boys I haven't spoken to for a while, but it'll never matter. You know, we went to war. It wouldn't matter if I didn't speak to them for 10 years. You know, they'll always, you know, once
yeah, that
that
bond.
experience, yeah, it's forever. You know, we didn't literally go to war, but that's what sport really is. It's safe war, isn't it? You know, you go to
Yeah,
war, but everyone comes.
play war.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, what an amazing thing. And speaking to other people and doing the podcast has really allowed me to be more happy with what I've done and what I've achieved, and hearing people, you know, hearing the feedback of people talking, you know, about how much they like it and what they
yeah, I
take
love
from
your
it and
show.
stuff.
It's so good. Yeah, I wish I had
Yeah.
it when I was starting off rowing. I would have eaten it up. So you guys are doing a great thing over there. Like I love it, and I totally align with that kind of that vision that you guys have of giving that access to people and exposing people to what it's really like and maybe what the values should be. But yeah, cool. I wish we had more time, Tom, but we're kind of running out now.
No, that's
Why
good.
don't you
We
like?
can do that at some point.
Yes, yes, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I'd love to hear more, and maybe I'd love to hear a bit more about like what you're learning kind of from the guests and stuff like that. Even more so going into that. So, but yeah, why don't tell us a little bit about like what you're kind of up to next? If obviously there's the podcast, or what Row Gear does. If there's anybody out there as well that might need the help from you guys, like would love to hear that.
Yeah, so yeah, Rogier got really busy. So what we're doing now mostly is servicing and maintaining equipment, gym equipment, rowing machines, and the Concept 2 equipment in general, the skis and the bikes. The podcast has definitely helped get our name out a bit more,
Oh,
and we've been
cool.
really busy with it. And because of that, we sort of ran out of time to keep doing it. So we've had a bit of a break from the podcast. We haven't put an episode out since sort of towards the end of last year. We have been recording a few. We are going to get back to putting them out, hopefully getting them back out weekly. It's take a bit of time and effort. We try and do them all in person. You know, obviously that takes time, but you know, feel that it's a different way to do it.
Yeah, it is. It's
Not
better.
that any other way
It's
is
okay. It
wrong.
is
It's just
better. Nah, it's definitely better to do it in person.
yeah,
It
but
was so good doing it in
hard.
person. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's hard. So yeah, so there's that. So yeah, we're all over the country fixing rowing machines. Rogue is just going from strength to strength, and yeah, we really, like I said, just trying to apply all those things that made us good at what we used to do. That's making us good at what we do now. And I've got we've got three. There's four of us now. It's gone from one to four in the last couple of years. I've got
Awesome.
we've got a bass and some bands and stuff. So there'll be a lot more of that. We'll be out on the circuit still. We'll go and do some more regattas and stuff. But yeah, really, we do want to get back to the podcast and keep talking to people and keep that, just keep sharing that. I talk about, like those cheat codes, those little things that can just help people and do that. So other than that, yeah, it's really more of the same of what we've been doing. We've worked out what we're good at, I guess, and we tried a few other different things that came and went, and these seems to be the things that are going well. So yeah, doing that. We got so many people from Henley Regatta last year. The list of people that want to come on is huge. It's just kind of getting those schedules together and stuff. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's tricky.
yeah, for those listening and missing it, we will be back definitely at some point soon.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to the next episode, and yeah, yeah, go check them out. I'll link them in the bio. Your podcast and your equipment business with Rogue Gear. Thank you so much, Tom, for coming on. I really enjoyed hearing kind of your story and on the other side of the mic. And thanks for being so open as well about the highs and the lows. I know it's not always easy talking about that stuff. You take so important to you as a rower, and yeah, just a big congrats about your rowing journey and everything that you did, and how you're sharing it now, and both your story and um, other rowers' stories. So it's a great asset that the rowing world has, and yeah, all the best.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.